All right, good morning everyone. Kia ora and welcome to our Finance and Monitoring meeting this morning. We have a quorum when we take into account our councillors on Zoom, and welcome to Zoomland, Councillor Jeff, Senior Councillor Ryan and Councillor Milena. I think also joining us on Zoom will be Councillor Sarah and Councillor Louise. So very heavy on the online space today. So please be kind to me as I navigate a hybrid meeting. In the first order, I'd like to ask our Deputy Moko Tauriki to open the meeting this morning with a special karakia recognising the passing of one of Hamilton's significant kaumātua. Kia ora, I hand it over to you, Councillor Deputy Moko.
Kia ora tātou e te whare. Ka pū te ruha, ka hao te rangatahi. These were some words that our esteemed kaumātua Pukaya Nipia would utter to many of us young people coming through the ranks of the tribal ranks of Waikato Tainui over the last 2 decades. Pukaya Nipia was a senior kaumātua within Waikato Tainui and the very fabric of the tribe, and a senior kaumātua of Tūranga Waiwai Marae, the marae of the Māori king and of the Kingitanga. Today, Pukaya Nipia gets buried, and last night was a great opportunity for many of us from across the iwi, from across the motu, from across the nation, who came to Tūranga Waiwai Marae to share in his farewell. And so this morning I've asked Madam Chair if I could open up today with a karakia, an acknowledgement to Pukaya. Pukaya was instrumental in keeping the cultural perspective on behalf of Waikato Tainui, and any informal engagements that we would have had with our organisation here at the Kaunihera o Kirikiriroa over those years. And so he was always there, and he was certainly one of those senior kaumātua who would often say to many of us young snotty-nosed tribal members, you will do this, you will do that, and for him to give every confidence to some of us young ones at the time coming through the ranks to lead in particular areas, not just around some of the technical aspects, but the cultural aspects as well. And so today, I would like to undertake the traditional karakia of the Paemarire, as it was done this morning at Tūranga Waiwai. And this particular part of the Paemarire comes directly from the Bible, and I'm sure at some time, whānau, for those of you, when our senior leadership undertakes some cultural development training of some kind as part of our He Paumanawa Ora training, we will learn a little bit more about the Paemarire. But this particular part of the Paemarire is an incantation that comes directly from the Bible, and it says this: "Thine is the glory." And it was a way in how the Kingitanga fused at that time the missionary beliefs with our own traditional karakia, and then we have the fusing of karakia Pākehā and karakia Māori. Paemarire. O tia kina māramatanga e te atua ki tō mātou ki ingia tu hei tia. Tātou tahi anō te pauere te pani me te rawa korenga tinana e māwiwi tiana. Tainua kia mātou katoa I te ata nei ai. Nā te koro ni ai nā te koro ni ai nā te koro ni ai. Amen. 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 re hau. Pai mārire.
Thank you, Moko, for that. It's a very fitting way for our meeting to begin and acknowledge the hurt that's out there, but also a lot of love and wisdom that our kaumātua brought to us. Kia ora. Thank you, folks. Let's have a look now at our run sheet for the day and acknowledge apologies this morning from Councillor Bidder for full absence. Mayor Paula will be partial absence and Councillor Naidu Ralph for lateness. I also have, as I've said, on Zoom, our attendees, councillors. Thank you. And acknowledge that Councillor Milena will be leaving to attend the service of Pokaia, so and that'll be at around 10 o'clock. And lateness from Mark, Councillor Mark. Is there any other apologies that we need to note? No, that being that, I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Anna. All those in favour? Confirmation of the agenda as is on your run sheet this morning. Moved by Deputy Mayor Angela, seconded by Councillor Anna. All those in favour? Carried. Any declarations of interest this morning? Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Note your enthusiasm, if you would, staff. We have no one in the public forum, and that's a bit of a shame, but it's all right. It'll help us to be able to have an expedient meeting. Yes, in terms of that, plan a break at around 11 o'clock, which is our usual, and hopefully that might give us time to work through the open agenda and the opportunity to move into public excluded, perhaps after that or depending on how the meeting goes prior. Okay, so we're now at the confirmation of the minutes, and I can see Councillor Moko twitching, so he can be the mover, and Mayor Paula's itched her eyebrow, so she can second. All those in favour? Any matters arising actually before we do that? No? Thank you. All those in favour then? All right. Item 6, Chair's report. As is written, just noting that Tracy Musty, our Finance Director, will be joining the meeting via Zoom, and that's because she's going to be presenting at a conference in Christchurch, and that matter is on our financial strategy and the acknowledgement that we had from the Auditor General and the excellence of that. So it's something to be proud of as a city, that leadership that we take in our financial strategy, and acknowledgement to our finance team on the excellence in the work that has gone into to build that strategy. So we thank Tracy for her expertise and ability to be able to represent us in the fine city of Christchurch. I'm happy to take questions on that. That said,
Madam Chair.
And so, Mayor Paula.
Just thank you. Just a comment, if I may. I don't think there's nothing to question in the report, but I just want to share in your congratulations to Tracy, who's widely regarded across the country, especially with audit, as a highly skilled financier, financial manager. And just to say how lucky we are to have her. It's been extraordinary volatile times in financial markets and financial situations, not the economy in general, not just our own, but across the country. So it's one of those things where it's forever, the sand is ever moving under your feet. And as elected members, we charge our All right, brilliant, thank you. So now I just want to register on behalf of us all the thanks to Tracy. I think we should all take time from time to time to acknowledge that the workload gets excessively busy at various times. It's not like it's linear. With the annual plan, such a lot of work to prepare that, David and his team. And then, of course, we're coming into the LTP, and so the financial staff may have a small reprieve, and then, of course, they'll be setting up budgets for the LTP. And then we play with those as politicians, as we do. We adjust things. And then, while we go home after a long meeting, the finance staff are putting that all together and doing all those calculations. And I know that they often work till late at night. So I do sincerely want to note our appreciation for your team, David. And we do note the skill and strength of Tracy as a member of your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Fine words. One other comment that I'll make, actually, and as a result of a text this morning, note that we have, and I refer to the first paragraph of my report regarding the annual plan, that submissions are open till the 8th of May, and that at the current time we have 1,116 submitters to that. So there's a great deal of interest and an opportunity for us as councillors to really hear from our citizens. So in the next week, if you can, at your leisure, take the opportunity to spread that message wide and invite submissions from our community so that we can help build the very best of our annual plans. Thank you. And that said, I'll put that the Chair's report be, I beg your pardon, Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm, so it's kind of general comments rather than formal debate, is it? Yeah, okay. So I've got like a weird feedback that I'm getting in terms of, I can hear myself echoing as I speak, which is slightly off-putting, but I'll carry on. I just wanted to, I guess, while acknowledging your Chair's report and comments around rates increase being lower than our neighbours, I did want to raise the flip side of that, which is that our annual plan, I guess, is an opportunity to adjust our direction in terms of the rates, and that the long-term plan was a forecast rather than a promised, in my own view at least. And so just, I guess, noting my concern really that while a lot of other councils are actually using the annual plans to respond to the inflationary pressures that we're experiencing, we're sticking to 4.9%, which is going to put us in a more difficult position when we get to the long-term plan, and we're going to have a harder time catching up. And I do question whether I guess it really is doing our residents and ratepayers a favour in holding to the long-term plan forecasts. So I just wanted to really raise that concern given the comments in the report, but yeah, acknowledge also the other side of it in terms of wanting to give ratepayers a greater level of certainty and in that sense holding to long-term plans. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. Any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything. I just do have to comment on my good friend Councillor Sarah. The 4.9% is a bit more than an indication or a commitment. It is actually, if in the long-term plan, it is set down as part of our financial strategy. So I feel that that is more than an indication. And it came on the back of and I've said this before in the chamber, I hate to harp on, but the previous LTP where we did what Councillor Sarah sort of is saying, is in that we sort of indicated without really committing to a 3.8. So this time around, it was part of the financial strategy. And I think it is important. It's great, Chair, that you've put that in there. It is certainly, good, I guess, good bang for a ratepayer's buck. We're often balancing everything that they would like and that they need with what they can afford, and that's always really, really hard. So, I respectfully sort of disagree with Councillor Thompson just on that one point. Thank you.
I'm not going to say something, but I feel like
Mayor Paula, yes.
Deputy Mayor Angela is completely correct. It was long canvassed in the long-term plan to have a rates certainty for our ratepayers. That's part of what we consider. And 4.9 was forecast. My concern is, of course, that many people won't have remembered that 4.9 was always forecast for this year in the LTP. You do have to cut your coat according to the cloth, and that's what we've done. We actually had a very, and Sarah and some other councillors raised the points that she's raising now very well at the time, and it was debated. And the majority decision of council was to hold the rates to the 4.9 forecast in recognition of, as Angela says, some other factors like affordability in this time of a cost of living crisis and other things. The LTP, that's on our heels. That's the time to really dig into all the projects, what you want to fund, what you don't want to fund, in conjunction with our community. So I look forward to that, and we'll understand from the community what it is they can and want to pay for and what they don't in greater depth in the LTP. So there'll be some lively debate, Sarah, about all the good projects that we love to have in or we don't want in at that time. And so that argument that you've raised there will be very appropriate to raise again at that point in time as well. All right, thank you.
Okay, there are no more speakers. So I've moved and nominated Councillor Moko to second. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 7, our capital portfolio monitoring report, and I'll invite Ian Anderson to the chair. Thank you. This is, and so just for the meeting's purpose, we'll be using the 2 chairs at the top of the room for presenters. So the floor is yours, Ian.
Good morning, Chair Maxine. Good morning, elected members. Good morning, Your Worship. I'm here today to present the 3-quarter financial result for the capital program for the current financial year. You will note from that report, well, I'm going to take the report as read. What I will say is you'll note that in this iteration of the report that we've added a second recommendation, and that you wouldn't normally see in this report. It's come about as a need to move with pace, and it's around asking or seeking approval to give approval to our Chief Exec to award a contract to KiwiRail for the design and construction of level crossing upgrades at Killarney Road and Claudelands. For an approved contract sum up to 5.5 million. Just noting this comes out from the Surf Transport Choices program. This approval today will allow that design work to commence immediately, and then what will happen obviously is under resolution from council, the macro scope for the actual physical works will come back to the Infrastructure and Transport Committee to give that approval later on. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. There's more narrative in the report that covers that, and if you wanted further detail, General Manager Chris can take you through some of that. Just onto the main body of the report. Look, after the 9 months, the total spend for the year has been 198.7 million, with associated capital revenue of 49.5 million. This is against a revised annual budget of 296.4 million. I just stress that revised budget is taking into account all the changes that have been made up until today, plus the changes we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's around deferrals and changes to the budgets that we bring back to this committee. On the note of deferrals, we're now reporting at the 3/4 mark, are now sitting at 72 million, but we do expect that number to rise to between 80 and 90 by the end of the financial year. So the 72 is the committed ones that we are 100% certain on. The gap between 72 and 80 through 90 is just understanding what will happen between now and the end of the financial year in terms of physical delivery of the program and what actually happens. There's other changes we're reporting today. There's a minor one on the expenditure side where expenditure is actually reducing by 900,000. That's associated with the reclassification of services and software from a capital item to an operating item, and so that will move from the capital statement through onto the operating statement. There's also a significant uplift in revenue, and that's recognition that the extent of the program we run, which is our service connection program, which is connections into our water, wastewater and stormwater networks. So we'll put that forward in front of you as well. I've introduced a new section today. I believe there's been some requests for this in the past. It's just to give you a very quick update on where we are with our HIF drawdowns. That's our Housing Infrastructure Fund. I'll just remind elected members, Council entered into an agreement with the central government a few years back for 180.3 of an interest-free loan to enable the Peacock development to go ahead. At this point in time, we have made 17 drawdowns. There are currently 2 in progress. One was submitted beginning of this week. Another one is likely to be submitted end of next week. That'll take the total drawdown to 118.9 million. And I just want to reiterate the interest-free, how that works is that each drawdown as it's submitted and the money is paid through the council, that at that point that triggers a individual 10-year interest-free loan on that amount. So that's how it's managed. So at the moment we have 17 drawdowns and interest-free terms, and the next 2 will bring us up to 19. And the expectation is, given the forecasting to date, is we should be looking to fully draw down on that loan by the end of this calendar year, or certainly that first quarter of the new calendar year being 2024. We're just work in progress. We talk about it regularly at this meeting. Look, it continues to be a large number, but again, it continues to be a high level focus for council staff as we work through it to ensure that we do get the majority of that cleared by the year end. And an interesting, something I'll make you aware of. There is a lot of emphasis going on at the moment about clearing the transportation work in progress for the simple reason that that's subject to an asset revaluation. So it's imperative that we do get the bulk of that cleared out of WIP and through into the fixed asset register prior to that revaluation taking place, so that revaluation is accurate. In terms of the overall portfolio risks, look, we continue to make you aware of the current economic conditions, which I think we are all very aware of. As what's happening in the country at the moment, along with the recent weather events, we're still causing reason to monitor that. And I mean, by the recent weather events, I do reference the cyclone that occurred back in February. Look, the reality too is, you probably noticed yourself, we had an unusually wet summer. Or through that main construction period, and that has impact on our ability to deliver, and ultimately will have an impact on that deferral number I mentioned earlier, in terms of we weren't able to do the volume or level of work we had expected through that period. Look, finally, we've got our 9 individual program sheets, which I think tell a really great story about what we're actually delivering outside of the pure financials. So they, emphasise that each of those programs has a highlight of the target achievements that were agreed at last LTP, so you can see what's happening in that space. And then finally, look, we've recorded 5 individual projects that we've classified as having a risk attached, an orange risk. That means the risk is significant, but it is being monitored by staff, and that's where we are with that. So, and they're listed in the report on paragraphs 84 through 88. And on that note, I will stop there and happy to take any questions from the floor, from Zoom behind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
as usual, excellent summary of what's in your report. And I'll go to Councillor Wilson for the first series of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. My question is actually to Chris Allen. Chris, in light of the level of deferrals, are any of those deferrals contributing to our current crisis situation with some areas of the city not being able to develop due to lack of critical infrastructure?
No.
Thank you. I'm a little surprised to hear that. So you're saying that that there were no projects that we had deferred that would have alleviated our current situation?
That's correct. There's one large project in there associated with the bulk storage, which is the core program of things that we need to do to help with that situation. And we're currently on track with that program. It's just about to end its current phase and move into the next phase. And that's pretty much on program.
Thank you.
If you're just looking at the project risks that you identified on whatever page that is, I think 22, two of them are significant, relate to the Peacocks area, and it says it's going to be covered off in the public excluded, so I won't go into the detail. But in terms, does that add to the overall cost of the project, or does it cause delays? Is the issue, I think, would it be of public interest?
As in public excluded, I'm just looking across to Andrew. Did you want
I understand why any quantums and things like that maybe, but why would it be otherwise treated in confidential?
If I may take that question, Ian. So that part's not intended to be confidential. It's just the commercial negotiation aspects require the PX paper to be taken separately.
That's what I understood. So
your question is not required to be answered in a confidential part of the meeting.
So can it be answered in a non-confidential?
Yeah. So the reason they're orange is because of timing. So we've suffered in the Peacock case, suffered a very significant wet summer period, and it's not that wet weather experience isn't limited to Hamilton City itself. Because of the scale of Peacock, we've got significant contracting resources deployed across New Zealand. One of the most significant of which is the heavy fabrication for parts of the bridge structure, which has been fabricated in Hawke's Bay. So when you take that perspective, the wet weather event will have a material impact on the program, the timing of the program. The cost is something that's yet to be fully determined because it's a contractual consideration that needs to be brought to bear for the costs, and it requires the contractors to make claims, and then for those claims to be robustly assessed in the context of the contract. So that part hasn't happened yet. So from my perspective, there's a risk around cost that we'll work through and look to manage. But there's certainly a time change for aspects of the projects.
So we might talk some other point about the potential financial claims around that. Is that stuff that would be in confidential? Okay, cool. In terms of, and that's the Bournebrook extension, consenting issues with the compliance of NPS on fresh water. Can you give me a little bit more detail? I'm sorry, I haven't been in the detail of that one, but.
Yep. So this is our work out at the Rotuna Town Centre around the new library.
Yeah.
So we have some roading transport corridors to do there. So an issue popped up a year or so ago, and we brought to this council about national policy statement on fresh water. So it relates to, if I may call it, an old farm drain that we had planned to culvert and relocate to build a road. The policy statement has put that in a difficult area in terms of how that farm drain is viewed, and that part of the work is on hold as we're working through that with regional council. So it is taking a long time to work through, but we are working through it. And my last report, it's moving through fairly positively, but slowly.
So on that respect, is there anything that we can do? Because we were with Waikato Regional Council yesterday, briefly, and I guess that we've got every interest in working expediently together, because if it's slow at their end, that's costing us at this end, which is the same ratepayers, right, at the end of the day. So how do we make sure that these high priority projects that have an environmental hiccup or whatever associated with them, concerning hiccup, how do we get those to be expediently dealt with? That's just a broader question.
Yeah, like I think there's degrees of escalation that we use. So we've used a number of the escalation issues in terms of, elevating it, up to general managers and chief executives. So I've had a number of meetings personally, high level, with regional council. Look, it is a serious issue for New Zealand Inc. in terms of how to interpret this national policy statement. So I'd have to say regional council are diligently working through it with the rules that are in front of them. So
that has been nearly a year, right?
It's nearly a year. It's involving a lot of reconsultation with Manu Whenua and local iwi as well. So that's the step we're working through at the moment. But as I say, it's moving forward at the moment in a positive direction, but very slowly.
It might just be worth adding to me, Paula, the national policy statement. There were calls for submissions on this particular aspect, because we're not the only area, as Chris has said, caught up in this challenge, and we did make some quite comprehensive submissions on this aspect of the MPS freshwater. We haven't heard yet as to where the ministry has got to in terms of any changes to that. So it's something that we should follow up and just see if we can get a status as to, are they taking on board the submissions, and are they going to modify that national policy statement?
Could I just add, it's not impacting the overall development out there. The library's still happening, the road, the basic road network is happening. This is one part of the road network, which is a bit of a bypass around it. So the substantive project is still moving forward. It just won't have the complete transport network for some time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just on cost escalation, I think we should always ask this, because the economy is forever changing and the financial situation got budget coming up too. Is there anything since we talked about it for the annual plan around cost escalation that we're aware of that's changed anything, or because I know the bank have just changed their rates again and a few things like that. So anything new or substantial or was it just?
Well, I think if I can answer that, the change, which was unexpected in terms of the OCR going up 0.5, is causing us to review our interest costs forecast for the annual plan. So we're doing that at the moment, and we'll bring that back to council.
So that will be part of the deliberations report and things. Yeah. I think through you, Madam Chair, would like to have that as a sort of standing brief, in that we, as we go forward to the annual plan, we understand what's going on, because it's moving very fast. And just, can we also have an update once the budget's out on the 18th of May? I think the budget comes, is it? Government budget? So it'd be really interesting to see if there are any adjustments within that. So if I could just ask that be factored into our discussions, please. Thank you.
That's the end of your questions? Yep. Deputy Moko.
Got two questions. Is the revenue uplift that you have noted in your report, is that the one that's referred to in item 7 in your report? 0.7?
This is the capital revenue?
Yeah.
Million I mentioned in my
that's the one.
narrative. That's connections are, if I've interpreted your question right, the connections are as a volume-based business, if I can use that word, that council runs. So generally the budget that we put forward as an equal budget. So if we put $1 of cost and we put $1 of revenue in, so this is just about acknowledging that in actual fact, the volume of work going through that space is significantly higher than we thought. It's probably an indication to staff to have a harder look at how we budget for those connections and putting forward a more realistic budget on both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, on paragraph, it's $6 million.
That's the $6 million, yes.
The second question is around contract variation impacts. Do we know what those cumulative impacts are as a result of the cyclone? Have we had to make many variations to contracts? Because I know that there's a significant cost every time we make a variation to a contract. Have we had to do much of that at all?
Chris might want to jump in. My observation is no, we have not. What we're indicating by putting that into the report is that we are aware that that cyclone happened recently. The concern was that it could have a national impact on both supply of labour and on materials, and therefore it could flow through into some of our capital program. I'm not aware of anything to date that we've seen, and that's why we put in here as we continue to monitor it. Chris may be able to add something to that though.
Just to reinforce what Andrew just spoke about, so he has some material supply issues where things have been made in Hawke's Bay, and he'll talk about that in the public excluded section. But apart from that, nothing substantial thing. I just, well, I've got the microphone. Could I just make a small correction to Councillor Ewan's question before? I'm just looking at that. So there is a deferral shown just on the sheet for citywide waters, the capital sheet. It's a deferral of funding for the wastewater bulk storage program development. So that is showing a development, but I think my substantive answer still stands. I think in terms of the milestone, I'm on target for the milestone, and we're nearing, and the commentary against that reflects that we are nearing the completion stage of this phase, which is identifying our sites and about to move into planning. But just a small correction, apologies, Councillor Ewan. There is a deferral that I'm showing on the sheets in the report.
Deputy Morco, that's the end of your questioning?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you have some follow-up questions based on
thanks,
that?
Madam Chair. No, on a separate issue. Page 15B, the 5.5 million for the rail design and construction of the level crossing. Clearly, this is not new funding. We've got the funding. I just want to just pressure test the costing in light of the current economic conditions. We are confident that that's a true reflection of the likely cost. I'm just trying to...
If I could pick this up, Councillor Ewan. So these are two projects on the Transport Choices program that have come to Infrastructure and Transport Committee for approval. So this is the $37 million program, which is heavily funded by Waka Kotahi with some funding from council. So these are two projects on there. At the Infrastructure Committee meeting, you passed a resolution to bring back macroscopes for anything over 1.5 million. So this 5.5 consists of two crossings. So it's a fairly simple but sophisticated upgrade of the two rail crossings just for signalisation and making it safer for pedestrians, no real interference with the road network. One of them is just over the 1.5 million, 1.55, and the other one is about the $4 million mark is our estimate. So it's a monopoly situation because it's signalisation, only Kiwi Rail can do that work. So we need, time is critical, so we want to get the order placed. get the design underway. We'll put a hold in our contract to allow us just to bring back that macro scope approval to comply with that resolution before we move ahead with the construction. As with all these monopoly situations, we're beholden a little bit to the monopoly supplier on their pricing, but we do have the opportunity to work with them and test it. And at times they put some components out to the market and we try and encourage that.
Thank you.
And over to Zoom to Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. This question might also be for Chris or possibly Evelisa. It was just in regard to the, firstly, the transport centre upgrade. At this stage, so it said in the report we've deferred the construction funding, but at this stage, is there still the possibility of us at least signing contracts for construction prior to the end of this National Land Transport funding round?
I'm just checking with Evelisa who's best to answer this one. I'll wait for Evelisa to come to the table.
Sorry, Councillor Sarah, we have a bit of a challenge for the spaces in the room today. So
yeah, I nominated myself to the back of the room, Councillor Sarah. So through the chair, in terms of we're working really hard to get that, so and to get the design and having that approval come through still the Infrastructure and Transport Committee, so that process is still going, and then we'll work really hard to make sure that those processes are out to secure the Waka Kotahi funding portion in term for the NLTP round, for the new round. So we're, as a team, we're working really hard to secure that and make that happen.
So Evelisa, are you looking at being ready to be able to secure funding within this current round, or are you now looking at the next funding round?
It's this NLTP that we're looking to secure, and to secure the funding, which will then potentially move into the future years. So we want to get that security now to give assurance that that is locked and loaded for us.
Okay, and the other part of my question was just also for you, probably Evelisa. It was also in regard to the reduced revenue from the Transport Agency, and that's we've deferred a number of projects in the draft annual plan, but we're also, is there any opportunity to I guess negotiate or work with Waka Kotahi around what will ultimately be, spare funding that's now not being applied to projects to potentially move ahead with other projects? And I'm referring in particular to the requests that we're receiving around the Ulster Street crossing. So is there a way that we can say, hey, look, this whole portion of funding is now not going to be used this funding round? Can we work with them to apply it to something else?
We try very hard every year, particularly in the third year of the current NLTP, to make sure that we maximise our co-investment through Waka Kotahi. And so yes, we will be looking at those projects, and I think one of those we've already talked to through this committee and reference to was the Ward Street project. And so it's around looking at all of those projects as a council to consider what we can do, but also working with Waka Kotahi, because they have those pots of money under those funding allocations as to what we can do. And I know that Robin and her team work really hard to maximise getting the additional Waka Kotahi's co-investment in that third year when we know that we can deliver that project. So absolutely yes, but we can't guarantee that we'll be successful.
Okay, Thank you. I look forward to some more conversations around that. Thank you so much. Cheers.
No further questions in the room. Just a question from me with regard to the Kiwi Rail. I note that the decision is coming through this committee in order that we have the ability to award the contract and get into the design phase, and then all future decisions will go through the Infrastructure and Transport Committee. That's correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. So it's really just a timing issue from this perspective. And then my other question was with regard to the wet summer that we've had, and acknowledging that and the disruption that's been caused due to that. However, we've had a pretty good March and April. How has that been able to advance the work or to be able to keep the program going, and in fact perhaps even catch up?
Yeah, your observation is a good one. My answer won't be quite so good. Every project is different, depending on the program and what they were scheduled to do and what they couldn't do and what they can catch up. So every single project, and generally for us it's our earthworks projects. So Peacocks is definitely affected. Borman Road will be one, although we're at the early stages there. So every project will be different, but you're quite right. There could be some balancing out, over the overall program, depending on where they're at and how critical programs are.
The opportunity to increase the hours of the day where work can be completed, where there's daylight hours available, I guess, or where there might be lighting opportunities to be able to complete the work over a longer period of the day.
Yeah, there's normally two big variables. One is work hours. The other one is what we call an earthwork season. So normally there's a limit, between summer and winter where you can't work in the winter. But depending on the weather, you can make a good case, and depending on your track record for silt management, etc., you can negotiate variations to consent. So both of those things are looked at, just recognising that sometimes working at night causes other problems in terms of noise and neighbours, etc.
All right, there being no further questions, beg your pardon, Councillor Nadia Rolfe.
Thank you. Just a quick one regarding Rotatuna Village. I'm not sure if you've talked about that already. The delay, the orange colour for the delay, how long is that delay, or do we have a timeline?
Yeah, we just quickly spoke about that earlier in the meeting. So it's a consenting issue that we're working through with Regional Council. It's been about a year. It's taking a long time to work through. We are working through it as quickly as possible. We're in a phase of just consultation with some key stakeholders before we go back to Regional Council. So I'm hoping that that we can unlock it in the next 2 months is what I'm hoping. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So now I'll call for a mover and a seconder of the motion, which you'll find on page 15. It includes receiving the report and approving the Chief Executive's authority to work with Kiwi Rail on the projects identified there. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? The Deputy, Councillor Sarah. Very well, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sarah. We'll move into debate. And I guess first words from me, really this report shows us the extreme conditions that we're working with at the moment, not just in our weather, but political issues and also our financial situation as well. We need to be flexible and have the opportunity to be able to work positively in order to be able to keep up the programs that we have. And some of those are in another item that we'll be covering today, but certainly are issues that our community are looking for us to be able to work on these projects. Once again, Ian presents a great visual opportunity for us to be able to see how the progress is working, and for me, for one, that's a really helpful way to be able to identify positives and the negatives that are coming through into this report. I'll leave it there for now and invite Councillor Wilson to follow.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Max. Look, I obviously will be supporting the motion. I do want to say that I am concerned that some of our deferrals may be coming back to bite us a little bit. And I don't say it with any motivation to blame, because that's not at all helpful. What I want and what I am hoping to send a message to all elected members as we go into annual plan and the LTP is, at the very core of what we do, it should be the critical infrastructure that makes us a safe and livable city. But I am concerned that we may not have allocated the priority of some of this critical infrastructure that is leading to many parts of our city not being able to have the development which I think we all thought we had enabled. Now, I know staff will have strong opinions on this, but I think the proof in the pudding is simply that there are many parts of the city that we can't develop. And I am comforted slightly that some of these projects that I think we've had an indication are now underway will alleviate. I would hope that as we move forward, that we aren't retrospectively having to manage these things, that we prioritise them well in advance. That's the only comment.
Mayor Southgate.
Yeah, I do share some of Ewan's concerns in respect to, we're in such a volatile financial time. And I know the staff are looking out very carefully to see what's coming at us, but some of the things in the report, of course, are not surprises to us. But, you wonder when you have to grip those situations up, when we think about poor weather. Well, yeah, we have had the cyclone, we get that, but that's a risk that needs to be factored in. The resilience projects as well. Can't plan everything, I know. Every time I'm watching the AM show, whatever, over breakfast, the financial story, the financial instability that the country seems to be in at the moment is highlighted in one way or another. Like you say, David, we had the bank rates go up, food prices continue to get bigger, increase. The labour supply markets continues to be an issue. The supply of raw materials for construction continues to be an issue. And these are issues that I am talking with my colleagues in Wellington about, because I think it's something that not only plagues Hamilton City Council, but plagues local government in general, because we're big players in our community. So that does, I just want to say that, I am concerned about that. And so I'm hopeful, I'm a little bit hopeful that when we go down to the local government conference in another month or so, that the sessions that they have with leading and consultants from around the country on alternative funding mechanisms for local government will yield some really significant and new fruit, because we've been playing in the same space for some time around how we fund ourselves. And if we only rely on developers and rates, we'll only get so far. And Blair's team and others have done a really great job at attracting government funding. but that's a competitive regime that we all enter into, one council versus another. And I'm of the strong opinion that that can't sustain if New Zealand is really going to build what it needs to build. Very strong supporter of Blair's work around city deals or infrastructure deals that match the need with the funding, because otherwise we just play around with stuff. We move things around in our budgets to try and do the best we can, but we never tackle the major problems. Sorry, I know 2 minutes is quite little, isn't it?
And any other debate or comments from the floor? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now, move to item 8, financial performance. And online, we welcome Tracy. Tracy, who is in Christchurch. How's the weather down there? Oh, Queenstown, I beg your pardon.
Queenstown, yes, and it's a stunning day, thank you. I've got a great view out my hotel window, so not all bad.
Wonderful. The floor is yours, Tracy. And for members, that's page 47. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everyone. So first of all, I just want to start off. Unfortunately, there's a couple of errors in the report I just want to highlight today. So just on paragraph 6, where we've got the accounting surplus of 106 million actual versus a budget, that should have been 25.9 million, not the 53. We've accidentally picked up the wrong number in that table. And just again on paragraph 19, that variance for the accounting surplus, it's actually a positive variance, not a negative variance. So I just want to acknowledge that, and if we can fix those, Amy, in the minutes, that'd be much appreciated. So getting on to the actual report itself. So, year to date, we are still reporting quite a favourable variance against our accounting result and our balancing the books result. But I just wanted to walk you through a couple of things. Just a reminder that as we go through each of these activities and each of the different expense lines, you'll notice, especially when we get into the forecasting, there's lots of ups in the revenue and there's lots of overspends and things in our expenses. So I just want you to think about that because that's very much related to things that we do. So with some of the areas, we obviously get an extra revenue. So we are over budget for that revenue, but then you'll notice when we get into the expenses and personnel and professional or admin fees, obviously we've got those expenses also over budget to match that revenue. So I just wanted to remind members of that we are usually, when we do those things, it is a net effect of that. So as you would have noticed, our largest, and will continue to be so, our largest negative and unfavourable variance that we're going to have for this year is the finance cost. You've already spent quite a bit of time talking about that this morning with the OCR and the banks and those sorts of things. So that is showing as our unfavourable variance year to date, and also that's the forecast negative variance that we're showing for when we get to June. So just on that last change in early April, I have another meeting with PwC in our Treasury space to review what that looks like. We have just done another lot of fixed hedging, getting our fixed rate up a little bit more. The change in the last few weeks around water reform and the delay in that also changes our outlook a little bit as well. So just to let you know that is something that, as I always do, we'll continue to monitor, but that does slightly change what we will do, obviously in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, looking at that particular number. And as David also has highlighted this morning, that might also change what we're doing and what that looks like for the annual plan as well. So just on fees and charges. So fees and charges, we are doing really well in this area this year, and we're still tracking ahead of budget. So increased patronage across our visitor destinations and improvements in our zoo, so sales in our zoo space. The zoo shop. So that's obviously resulted in some favourable budgeted retail sales. And also our H3 area has also seen some large scale events that they've also had that were again unbudgeted. So again, remember additional unbudgeted revenue, but that also has some additional unbudgeted expenses. And the other thing just to note in our area, so there is additional expenses relating to storm and weather. And again, related to Ian's report this morning. So you're seeing the effects of that through in our operating expenses. And then also just in Blair's area in the growth space, some additional costs coming through regarding district plan and some of those planning changes as well. And just the last thing from a treasury perspective, just to note from the debt, it does look like it's a bigger debt number this month. We have paid back $65 million in April, so that brings us back in within what we were budgeting from a debt perspective. So I would like to just hand over a little bit unusually this morning, but to Lance. So what Lance wanted to do with you today is just talk about some of the things that the staff and the team are doing behind the scenes around, given that we know we are tracking to be obviously over our balancing the books forecast for June, and what things that Lance has requested to be put into place. So I'll hand over to Lance to talk about that.
Thanks, Tracy. Just firstly, the team's going to, on a weekly basis, just keep looking at the forecast. And obviously things change almost week by week at the moment. So we'll be doing that. But there's a couple of things which I've asked right across the organisation, just looking at the $6.7 million unfavourable around balancing the books that Tracy talked about, and how we can actually see if we can pull some of that back. So I brought in a slowdown on recruitment of vacancies. So outside of compliance, mission critical, safety sensitive, and a number of customer facing roles, I'm putting all other vacancies on hold until the new financial year. The recruitment of those, I know that's only a couple of months, but it will make some financial difference, and also get managers to actually start looking at, is there different ways of doing things. The other thing is actually asking staff and the teams, the GMs, and working with the unit managers, is stopping or delaying some of the OPEX spend outside of personnel costs until the new financial year. So mainly around non-critical program maintenance, buying materials, deferring non-critical consultant spend, deferring training, things like those. So those are just some examples. And the other thing is also looking at the revenue forecasts as well. Tracy mentioned, some of the good news at the zoo and different places and that sort of thing. Just making sure that we're really having a look at those revenue forecasts going forward, so that we can make sure that we are maximising our opportunities in that space. And there's other areas such as Waterworld and a whole bunch of different parts of council. So I just want to give council some assurance that we're not just sort of sitting here waiting for this to happen. So we actually put measures in place in the last over the last 4 weeks to see what we can do around pulling this back.
Thank you, Lance. Any further comment from you, Tracy?
No, I'm happy to take any questions.
Very well. To the board. Questions from the floor? Councillor.
Yeah, just on the back of your report, Lance, just want to acknowledge the efforts that you're making across the organisation to pull back on some of those costs, to rein in some of those costs. I do have one concern. I think that if we are reining in some of the costs, particularly, and it's going to impact in some of the areas of training, I'm sure that you have done a very comprehensive analysis across the organisation, but I wouldn't like us to forfeit key critical training for our staff if in the long term it's going to have an impact further on down. I'm thinking about things like health and safety training sorts of would it be fair to assume, Lance, that things like health and safety will not be compromised ahead of maybe some other preferential training that some of the managers may have for their staff?
You're correct. So any safety sensitive training, longer term development that had already been booked in, that will continue. I'm basically talking conferences and seminars and things like that. So which there's sort of a bit of a season for those, which in a number of industries, because they're busy during the better weather months, then they start sort of from April onwards to start having their kōrero, during the winter months and that sort of thing. So we're just asking for prudency around that.
And just to follow on from that, just to know that Tracy's flights are paid for by Tautua, so so she's down in Queenstown not on our cost.
It's a bit harsh.
Any further questions from the floor or in Zoom? Mayor Paula.
Report that we have quite a few people contesting their rates. Can I just have a little bit, is that mostly commercial big items, or is that the smaller residents? I'm just interested in what the driver is around that, because we're unfavourable.
Yeah, so most of them, so as you know, we had quite a lot of objections this year. We're due to the timing of the revaluations and what those revaluations ended up being. Most of the residential ones have been done, but we are still working through some of the bigger commercial properties. So remembering they're done independently, and so that's still happening.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
And onto Zoom for Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. Lance, just a question. You mentioned putting a hold on non-critical maintenance, or something to that, I guess, meaning. Can you expand on that a little bit more? And are there any reasons for us to be concerned, I guess, given we know what happens when we aren't staying on top of maintenance of assets?
Essentially, when I say non-critical, I'll give you an example. It would be some tree maintenance that would have contractors do, which is they're not unsafe trees or anything like that. It'd be like programmed work that our ARB team don't do all of that work. We do have contractors as well, and we would just defer that till the 1st of July. Basically defer that for a couple of months, and then it'll go into their expenditure for next year. So look, we've done this before, but it won't be around any safety sensitive trees or anything like that. So that's just one example of where we might do that, or it might be some contracted weed spraying on the back of a park or something like that, where it won't have any critical effect on our levels of service or the safety of the community or our staff.
Okay, and it's not going to, say, have on a longer term impact in your view? In any way?
No. So we won't be stopping anything where it would mean that there's risk of an asset failure in the short, medium, or long term.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Lance.
Thank you. A question from me, Lance, with regard to the recruitment vacancies being put on hold, and acknowledge that you'll be mindful about where in the business that happens. I guess the consequential workload on the remaining staff, how might you manage that and ensuring that you're not putting extra pressure on the ones that are left?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We had quite a discussion about this with the exec team a few weeks back. So it's actually, obviously, it's about prioritisation, essentially. We don't want people working 70 hours a week and getting fatigued and having accidents and all that sort of thing. And it's just not fair on people. So it's actually saying what are the parts of their role that are absolutely critical to providing services to the community, and then what are parts of their role that are probably more internally focused, where we can defer that for a couple of months until the 1st of July. So that's essentially what we're doing now. And just remembering that we're not putting a freeze on all roles. We're actually doing it, so and we've got a whole process around that, and there's, quite rigorous discussion around it. So I can assure you that we won't be making people work, ridiculous hours or anything like that, to the stage where they either feel fatigued or they feel disengaged, and and it goes down that negative spiral. So we're being quite pragmatic around that, and the managers, to be fair, are actually quite adept at those conversations. I think COVID saw us in good stead around that too, with being flexible around what we prioritised and how we did that.
And just following that, you'll have the opportunity to communicate with managers the need to touch base with their staff on their wellness, but that also there'll be opportunities for staff members to identify if they're feeling overworked or put in a situation where they're required to do additional work.
Correct, and more so than normal. So we're making a real emphasis on that, and Dan and his team, our wellness program won't stop, and the checking in with staff will actually be ramped up. We've actually just brought in a new tool called Culture Amp, which allows for online, as well as it encourages structured and regular conversations as a one-on-one tool, which is really good actually, and we've been using it for our performance reviews too. So that tool's actually going to serve us in good stead just going through this period.
That's great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor? There being none, then I will put the motion.
Sorry.
I beg your pardon? Yeah, sorry.
I would like to participate in the debate.
So. Of course, yes. Yep.
So
yeah. Yep. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you're quite right. Then we need a mover and a seconder. Anyone from the floor? Moko, you happy to move? And Deputy Mayor Angela to second. Moko is the mover.
Yeah, I just want to first of all thank Tracy and her team for the layup of the report for this meeting, and it's been particularly good to follow and to look at the numbers, favourable or unfavourable. I particularly enjoy the way in how you've put the tick sign and the cross sign next to certain aspects of it, because it allows people like myself who are very kinesthetic and like to look at pictures and diagrams and those sorts of things. So thank you very much. It is not lost on me that we are potentially, that we are trying to make savings where we can. So I appreciate the work of our CE to try and make some of those savings wherever he can. And so I appreciate that level of work that you are doing with our staff, Lance. So thank you very much, and I appreciate and very, very much. It's not lost on me either the work that the general managers are doing to be more more efficient with where we are spending our money. So I just really want to acknowledge those facts. And just finally, Madam Chair, just want to acknowledge and thank you for your leadership, mentoring and allowing and to organising Tracy, David and the team to provide some training to those of us who are not so savvy around numbers. So appreciate in particular some of the terminology that we use in these reports. So thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to hear management proactively trying to mitigate the current financial performance. I would support management engaging in that activity throughout the year. I'm mindful as we come to the end of this financial year, we are desperately trying to rein things in. I would encourage management to have that proactive strategy for the entire financial year, because things are going to get tougher. And we don't have to look much further than up north to see what happens when you need to save $300 million. And that's an accumulation of behaviour over a number of years. I'm pleased to hear that we are looking at areas of increasing revenue where we can. I reiterate my comments I've made in the past about our investments. And I continue to be disappointed with the types of return we're getting from Hamilton Airport. And I'm reminded at these times when we're under financial pressure, one of the things we can do is increase rates, and we don't have an appetite to do that. And other things is to assume we might actually get a return on some of our investments while they're making good profits. So I am concerned about our balancing of the books. I am also very concerned about our potential headwind of revenue from development contributions over the next 12 to 18 months. And if we think we've got a problem now, wait for the tsunami that's coming at us. Financial discipline, colleagues, is going to be critical.
Mayor Southgate.
Councillor Wilson's not wrong around financial discipline. We do need that, but that when I think about what that means, it translates across also to the political members, the governing members of this team, understanding the public's ability to pay or appetite to pay on various aspects of our work, making sure that our core functions are always properly executed. And when it comes to the LTP, that we fully test and discuss the implications of the projects that we put forwards for that. And we've already worked through an LTP 3 years ago, but Ewan's right in suggesting that, you know, things do change and we have to be agile and look at what we thought we could do and what we can do in these present times. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're not. But I do caution elected members from all well intended, of course, but thinking of new things to add to the cost of the organisation. If we do new things in the LTP, they have to be hugely evidence-based in terms of value. Otherwise, we're just going to push ourselves into a corner of unaffordability with our community. And I've always felt, when I was in Councillor Kesh Naidu-Roth's role of community, that community sometimes gets a short shift of those that spend, and we're always sort of going after the dregs for the community. So I don't want that to happen, but I'm just urging a note of caution. These are extraordinary times. People are hurting out there. And we do have some core things to get done. We do have some things that we'd love to be done. We do have some things that the community really want to be done, but they don't really want to pay for it. So we have to weigh all of those things up in the upcoming months, and it won't be easy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Time as well, too. Well done. It's discipline for you, too. Oh, Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. A lot of, I guess, the reining in that we're hearing about in terms of costs, it doesn't sound actually something that you could make sustainable over, you know, a long period of time. I mean, we hear all the time complaints about us not maintaining certain things, like even if it's just spraying weeds or doing mowing and that kind of stuff. And I'm acutely aware and worried about the pressure that, you know, some of our staff are under in terms of workload as well. And the last thing that we want is to be losing good people. So I think that we've got to be really careful in terms of the cost of actually some of these decisions where we looking to make savings or cost reductions. And in the broader sense, looking forward to the long-term plan, again, sometimes I guess decisions around not spending money can have larger costs, and I'm thinking particularly in terms of our housing affordability. We need to be investing in the right infrastructure and things like that to be able to enable the housing that we need. Otherwise, those costs will end up landing on people in a far worse way than a slight increase to a rates bill to be able to enable that infrastructure. And similarly with our transport and things. So I think I guess I do want to thank staff for the work that they're doing to be looking closely at our budgets, and I acknowledge that it will be a pressure time coming into the long-term plan, but we've got to, I guess I ask that we make sure that we take a longer term view and don't get too short-sighted in terms of focusing on the here and now with our budgets, because otherwise we could be putting larger costs on our community. And climate change is another example of that. We have to ensure that we're resilient and we're adapting in particular to the impacts of climate change that are coming. And if we don't, the costs again will be much larger in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. Just a little bit over time, but points excellently made. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear any bells.
No, it's difficult online to hear that.
You might need to just say ding.
Oh, golly, that's tricky. I see no further on the board, but I'll make just a couple of comments myself. I guess, this is a situation that none of us welcome or that we have a great deal of control over, especially around the financial ramifications of interest rate increases, weather situations. But let's not lose sight of the fact that we're always able to respond. And the response that I've heard today from our CE is really encouraging. It takes account of the most urgent need in our business and resources that well, and uses levers in order to be able to alleviate some of the pressure where it isn't so urgent. I back up the point made by Councillor Sarah that these kinds of responses are not sustainable in the long term, but a useful tool for us to be able to use for a month or two in order to get some kind of relief. And that brings me to the point of Future Fit. That's the program that will give us the savings and the real look at what is needed in council for our future work and commitments. And, I urge our not just us as councillors, but our leadership team to use whatever means they can to be able to interrogate that well and use our knowledge in our sector and in our council and our work to put the best responses in place. Let's not forget, though, that there's some real positives in Tracy's report today, and I thank Tracy and her team for the excellent work that they do under some of the most difficult circumstances with some of the highest workload. I'll give myself 10 seconds more, I think. And so thank you for that, because this is when opportunities are able to be taken up when we're in the toughest of times that really can be putting us in the best stead. So on that, I will finish and go back to Moko for right of reply if he chooses to take it.
No need for a right of reply from here, Madam Chair.
You'll see on page 47. All those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Very good. Look, we are now at we do have Yeah, look, I'll with the leave of the committee, we have our guest Mark Butcher from the LGFA online today. That's our next item at number 9. So with your permission, I think we'll take that paper and then have a break for, well, then we can finish the open part of the meeting and take our break for morning tea. Is that all right with you, Deputy Mayor Angela? Thank you. Very well. So who's introducing? That's you, Tracy? Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Chair. So yes, we have the report today coming through from Local Government New Zealand. So we've got quite a bit in this report. So you've got the actual final report for the annual report last year. You've got their half-year report through to December. And you've also got their statement of intent in today's report. So in the report itself, it said that Andrew was going to be presenting today, but it's actually Mark's online and coming from Zoom in Wellington. So he will share some highlights from his report through with you today.
Very good. The meeting is in your hands, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, Your Worship and councillors. Look, I do apologise. I think you've got about 90 pages out of the 160, 170 in your pack relates to our GFA, and potentially if I can just spend 5 minutes, I might better condense those 90 pages down into maybe about nine pages, if that's okay. Look, I'll try and share my screen. If you can just let me know if you can actually see that screen.
Yes, we can, Mark. Thank you.
Good. Fantastic. Thank you. Look, I think first and foremost, just a very quick introduction on who LGFA is. We're the financing conduit for the local government sector. We have 77 out of the 78 councils members. The only council who's not a member is the Chatham Islands District Council. We also have 3 CCOs as members as well too. Simply, we borrow money and we lend it solely to our council members. We borrow at the lowest interest rates available. We're the cheapest borrower in the country after the New Zealand government. And that's largely because we have the same credit rating as the New Zealand government at AAA. We add on a very small margin to our loans, and so therefore we pass through all those benefits to our council and CCO members. Do want to acknowledge the role of Hamilton City Council as well in terms of LGFA and the success that we've achieved. You were one of the foundation councils who put together the concept of LGFA and actually funded the original work. There was 8 councils involved there. We now have 31 shareholders, so central government's a shareholder, and then we have 30 councils. You are the equal largest council shareholder at around 8.3% of our shares. In terms of borrowing, Hamilton City Council has been a great supporter of LGFA over the last 11 years. Currently, you're our 4th largest borrower. You have $780 million borrowed from us, which is just under 5% of our lending book. You have borrowed from us in the past on a short-term basis out to 1 year, a long-term basis out to 15 years, and you also have standby facilities from us as well too. You're also a guarantor. You provide about 3% or 2.9% of the guarantee. And then finally, your role is also an important role in that you have been a member of our shareholder council since establishment. David Bryant is actually on that, and that's been fantastic. If I just move just very quickly then into just some recent developments, and this is just a highlight slide, I suppose. Importantly, we've seen strong council borrowing over a number of years now. particularly in the last year, in the year to June 2022, we lent just over $3.3 billion to councils. In the last 6 months to December 22, we've lent 1.8 billion. So you're still seeing that we're seeing a growth in our lending book to council. So we're running at more like a $3.6 billion run rate at the moment. We've basically finished wrapping up all our councils as members now. We don't expect the Chatham Islands District Council to join, just given their low levels of debt. We do have 3 CCOs. We've got probably another further 3 CCOs who will be joining us in the next year as well. So the growth in our membership will probably come through CCOs as opposed to councils. And then finally, I think on this page here, the important thing is that we look to continuously improve in terms of our product suite to councils. One of the big areas of focus has been in the last year has been sustainable lending. And I'll talk about 2 of our sustainable lending products just sort of very shortly. Just in terms of the structure chart, we're a small organisation. We only have 10 staff. We have, in terms of governance oversight, we have 11 on the Shareholders' Council on the left-hand side. So that's 9 council appointees, and then also appointees from Treasury and from the Department of Internal Affairs. On the board, we have a very strong independent board. We have 6 directors, 5 of whom are independent, and we have 1 non-independent director, Alan Adcock, who's the CFO at Whangarei District Council. We also have a future director as well, which has been a very successful program that we launched last year, and we will look to roll that over at the end of this year. And then finally, we have a sustainability committee that has 4 external members on it as well too. And their role is to advise the board and the management team on everything to do with sustainability. Just in terms of our financial performance, you'll see that we've had a very strong, over the last 10 years, 11 years now, very strong growth in assets. As we've reached almost 90% market share of all council borrowing. Profitability tends to run at about $10 million a year. So as I said, we charge a small margin to grow our equity and to pay a dividend to shareholders. We did have a drop in profitability in the past year. That was due to the rise in interest rates. But under our SOI forecast, we're looking to continue on a much higher level of profitability going forward. Just in terms of a review of the financial statements that you got in front of you for the last 6 months, look, we're on track. We have 17 SOI targets. I think we're on track to achieve 15 or 16 of those. As I said, we have 89% market share. We have 100% council satisfaction with our GFA. We have done a lot in terms of sustainable lending. Our financial performance is aligned with our SOI. The only target we are not on track to meet currently, but we will be, is around our carbon reduction plan, in that we're just finalising the carbon reduction plan. In terms of the draft statement of intent in front of you now for the coming 3 years, I think what's important here is that as an organisation, we have 5 strategic priorities, and then we fit our 21 KPIs within those 5 strategic priorities. So our priorities are governance capability and business best practice, optimising financing services for local government. We also have environmental and social responsibility, effective management of loans, and industry leadership and engagement. So there are our 5 strategic areas, and then we back our KPIs actually within those 5. In terms of financials going forward, under our SOI, as I said, profitability tends to be relatively stable going forward. Importantly, these statement of intent financials assumes nothing happens with Three Waters, and that's a relatively unrealistic assumption, but that is the assumption we can only make at this stage. We will provide updated forecasts once we get to an understanding of where LGFA's role will be within Three Waters. Currently, we have around $16 billion of loans to councils. Around about $5 to $5.5 billion of those loans are against Three Waters assets. We've yet to form a view as to where we're going to be in terms of Three Waters and lending or possible lending to those water services entities. We are still waiting on effectively the DIA modelling for us to form an assessment on those water entities going forward. Once we have that, then the LGFA board will consider what the various options are. We will then come to council stakeholders, the credit rating agencies and our investors for their input, I suppose, into that process. So there's no decision has been made by LGFA as to what our role will be. We really do have to wait for further information before we do. Then that's one of the major work areas for us, obviously, is Three Waters. The other major work area for us is our approach to sustainability. And so in the last 18 months, we've put resources into sustainability. We've appointed a head of sustainability. We've appointed or established a sustainability committee. What's important about LGFA is that having a small number of staff, we have a very small carbon footprint. Our CO2 emissions are around about 40 tonnes per year. Put that in perspective, the local government sector carbon emissions are closer towards 2 million tonnes of carbon per year. So where LGFA can play a role is being an influencer and being an advocate for carbon reduction across the sector. So this is what we're trying to do now in terms of our establishment of our lending programs that basically reward or incentivize councils to take a far stronger approach to sustainability. So what we've put in place is really two lending products. We've put in place a green and social lending product for councils where you receive a discounted margin on your loan if you have projects that fall under the it's under 9 UN SDG targets for green borrowing on the green bond principles, and also 3 social borrowing categories. We also have in place now a product called climate action loans, because the GSS lending are project specific. What we've put in place now is a climate action loan. And what that means is that we will give you a discounted loan margin if you have in place a greenhouse gas emission reduction plan and you are meeting those targets as well too. And so you'll get a margin reduction on loans going forward. So we're trying to encourage, as you go through your long-term plan and looking at your project prioritisation, whether or not you've got projects that will be eligible for GSS, but also organisational wide. If you're putting in place a reduction plan and meeting that, then you will also be eligible for discounted lending. In terms of what we've done to date on our green and social loans, we've approved 562 million of loans, of which almost half have now been lent or drawn to date. 70% of those loans have been on green buildings. And then we've had about 15% on affordable housing to Christchurch City Council and 15% on climate change adaptation. The climate change adaptation is the Riverlink project here in Wellington, which is the strengthening or flood mitigation on the Hutt River. In terms of our climate action loans, to date, we've had 3 councils sign up to those. We only launched those in March, and so far we've advanced 355.7 million to the 3 councils. We have a pipeline, we think, of about a further $1 billion of climate action loans to a further 6, I think it is, or 7 councils coming up in the next 9 months. So we think that we'll probably get more traction under climate action loans going forward as opposed to the GSS loans. But I'm happy to leave it there and take questions through the chair, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Mark. Open for questions from the floor and from our Zoom councillors. And I see Councillor Casey Cox with the first question.
Kia ora, thank you for that that summary of all those pages. That was very appreciated. Just in regards, I guess, to one of your goals or objectives around good governance, I just noticed and I think this has been raised before with LGNZ, is the makeup of your board and the potential lack of diversity there. I'm just wondering what kind of work is being done to improve that.
Okay, so we have a diversity policy in place because our debt is listed under the NZX, and so we're subject to the NZX listing rules as well too in terms of that. We do have a policy in place. We are improving the diversity on the board as well too, so that is actually occurring. We're also seeing, as I said, the role of the future director coming through as well too. So certainly that has been a signal from the minister as well too of local government in the past too about strengthening diversity, and we've certainly taken that on board, and there'll be further improvements in diversity going forward.
Mark, it's David Bryant here. Hi, Anna, the Shareholders Council, of which I'm a member on, this is a core topic that we talk about and have talked to not only Mark but Craig Stabber, the chair of the board. They are doing a number of things to try and address that. The challenge has been, because of the sort of niche nature of the skills required to run such a technical organisation, it has been difficult. But in saying that, the Shareholders Council is encouraging the board to really drive hard and work on that diversity topic in terms of future appointments.
Cool, thank you. That's encouraging. The other question I had was just in regards to, I guess, the focus on this and social and environmental objectives through the work you do. And I was just interested to see that because we talk about 4 wellbeings here, so I was interested to see that there isn't the cultural objective mentioned, and also little reference to, or no reference that I could see to Tiriti or Waitangi. And I feel, I guess, concerned about that, given that, all the councils are shareholders, and we have discuss this and make commitments to it. So just a comment on that and any discussions you're having at the board level.
Yeah, so look, you've got to also think about our business model in that we borrow money from investors and then we lend it to 77 councils. So where we impact on the 4 wellbeings and around treaty issues is around the fact that we facilitate a lower cost of borrowing by councils who can then use those savings and interest costs into the community. So we don't have a direct interaction, I suppose, with the community. We have an indirect interaction through our council members. So that's why it's really hard for us we have in place at the moment a sustainability strategy and policy, and it's really hard. We found it difficult to really wrap in the 4 wellbeings into our business as much as what a council would do, because we're not a council. We're a lender, and then the councils use those proceeds to then impact on the community. So that's where you're seeing us relative to other CCOs is probably also different as well, because we're not a service delivery arm of councils. we are a facilitator of funding to councils. So we're doing as much as we can, but we're in a fairly unique space as an organisation.
And just finally, in regards to the loans that you give out around, I think the GSS loans, I was interested to hear that a portion of those had gone to affordable housing in Christchurch. And it's a topic we talk about here quite a bit, and our mayor has committed to addressing this particular issue in this triennium. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, what those loans are, and if there's opportunities or for other councils to also access loans in that direction.
Yeah, so the affordable housing loans to the Christchurch City Council are to the council, and then they on lend it to their community housing trust. So we can't. So under our documentation, under our foundation policies, we can only lend to a council or a CCO or a CCTO. We can't actually lend directly to an affordable housing trust. So what Christchurch City Council have done is that they have actually done it on behalf of their of the housing trust. So then they pass the proceeds on. Wellington City Council are currently looking at it for their affordable housing as well too. So it is actually starting to gain some traction.
Okay, thank you. That's exciting. That's all my questions.
Thanks, Councillor Anna. I'm going to go to Zoom to Councillor Ryan and then to Mayor Paula. So the floor is yours, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark, for your presentation. Question for you. I'd be interested in your views. It may test your remit a little bit, but you mentioned Three Waters, and there's a lot of ambiguity, obviously, around the lending. What's your view about removing the debt caps for councils, 250, 270% debt to revenue, and just lending more, when arguably the Three Waters is doing the same thing to another entity? Just interested in your views on that.
Yeah, so the debt limits within our policies are sort of set in line with a minimum A+ credit rating, and so the idea of those debt limits, it's to protect the guarantors of LGFA from a council entering into financial distress. So that is one option for us to obviously would be to increase those financial covenants. It's something that we haven't really tested. We have increased them 3 years ago now. I think it was mid-2020, 2021. We did increase them at that stage. The gearing of the water entities is going to be more likely 450% to upwards of 600%. So that's obviously above our current sort of financial covenant. So it would be unlikely that we would ever consider lifting them up to that sort of level. But that will be something that we'll consider. Okay, but unlikely at this stage. Most councils are well under those 270% levels anyway. And I think there's only 2 or 3 councils who are projected to actually get near them in the next sort of 5 years.
But I guess my question around that, Mark, is what's the difference if it's the same assets you're lending against? Why is there this perception around higher gearing for them is okay, but not for councils, with the core business?
So we haven't made a decision to lend to them. We've still got a lot to do, and we'll be coming back to Hamilton City Council and the other 76 councils as well before we make that decision.
Okay, so that's interesting. So is there an assumption from the Three Waters entities that they'll be borrowing against LGFA, or is there another financial entity in the market that I'm not aware of?
So in the original cabinet papers, the options which were being explored were borrowing from the government, borrowing from LGFA or borrowing from the capital markets themselves in their own names, or obviously the fourth option is borrowing from the bank market as well too. So they were the options. There's no assumptions at all about the WSEs actually borrowing from LGFA. That's a decision for LGFA, for the councils, for our investors as well too.
Thanks. Final question. You mentioned capital markets. What would the likely variation be in interest compared to your rates, for example?
Yeah, significant, because we're obviously the cheapest borrower after central government. So it will be higher. Look, it depends upon the term. It depends upon their final credit rating. It depends upon the amount they want to borrow, but it certainly would be higher. So no one's done the numbers yet in terms of what the additional cost would actually be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan, and to Mayor Southgate.
Thank you. Just interested in how LGFA, you were talking about the links to climate and carbon reduction, but in terms of delivering the biggest impost on councils at the moment, which is the cost of infrastructure, any thought on how that aligns more? It's really very much up to the councils at the moment to consider how they want to borrow for infrastructure. But in my conversations with government, getting an understanding of where infrastructure is going to deliver the best returns for the nation, and how we find better ways to borrow money for that, because to me that's the critical issue, is the huge, if you look at the Infrastructure Commission's report, and they've identified the areas of major spend. So I'm just wondering what thinking as a lender you have had in that space to enable local government to do its core functions around infrastructure, build a future, if you like.
Yeah, so hence Mayor, we never we rely upon the democratic process. So we won't come through and go, we're not going to lend to the council because we don't agree with that project in your LTP. So we rely upon the process that you go through, the consultation process, the long-term plan process, to make the right calls on those projects. All that we can do at the moment is that we've put in place the green lending program. So if you do have clean transportation, if you do have energy efficiency, renewable energy type projects, climate change adaptation projects, green building projects, then we will give you a lower borrowing cost compared to other projects that you might be borrowing on, or other councils. So we talk about a lot about the carrot and the stick. We can't wave a stick at you. But we can try and influence you by giving you a slightly better financial incentive. But that's the extent of it. We can obviously, and we do showcase best practice within the sector as well too. And so this is what we're trying to do. We sponsor the Taituara Local Government Excellence Awards. We try and showcase the projects that we're lending on to try and encourage other councils to actually think about these sorts of projects. But that's the extent of our mandate that we can actually do.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think it's a conversation to pursue with the local government, New Zealand, actually.
Thanks, Mayor Paula, and Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Mark. I was really interested in the discussion you're having with Councillor Ryan around the waters borrowing, and I'm just interested, while no decision has been made in any way around whether LGFA would lend to the entities, why are you considering, I guess, say a 450% ratio for them compared to councils which are around the 280%? What's the key differences there?
Okay, first we're not actually considering that was some of the original DIA modelling had within those water entities. So what we're waiting for before we can even think about it is to actually see the next round of modelling from DIA, which is due to come out in May. I'm assuming that's going to be deferred just because of the recent changes or proposed changes from 4 to 10. So we'll just have to have a look at that when it comes through, and then we'll start to think about whether or not we want to come to councils for their support for it. But at this stage, we haven't made that call. Okay.
Okay, and thank you for that clarification. In terms of, so I understand the covenant's kind of based on what I guess you think will maintain the A+ credit rating. And obviously some higher growth councils are really struggling with providing for the growth that they're experiencing with those caps. So I've got two questions around that. One is, how much could we borrow to the point that it would push down the credit rating? And if we went one notch down in terms of the credit rating, what impact would that actually have on interest rates?
Yep, I haven't actually got the modelling in front of me. Maybe David Bryant or Tracy can come back to you on that. And look, this comes down to a question of your optimal capital structure, I suppose, as an organisation, in that for a 1 rating notch downturn in your credit rating, it costs you 0.05% in terms of your borrowing cost.
Okay, that's helpful as a rough guide. And I mean, I guess one of the reasons why that's probably never considered is that most councils, as you said, aren't anywhere near their debt cap. So, and wouldn't agree to then paying high interest, so a small number of councils can borrow more. Would it be feasible to actually set up a separate financial entity, I guess, to enable borrowing for just the high growth councils, so that they could have a slightly lower credit rating, but be able to borrow more at what would, I presume, be still a lower amount, lower interest rate than going directly to the capital market?
Yep. So what you'll then start to get into, I suppose, is you don't get the scale advantages of being part of a large organisation. So we have significant scale benefits now. For example, we were borrowing cheaper than Kangora up until when their debt was assumed by central government. So even though they were central government owned, they didn't have the same scale as us. If anything, you could argue that Kangora was actually a stronger credit than LGFA. So one scale. Secondly, the more leverage you have, the lower the credit rating, the more the higher borrowing cost that you'll also pay as well too. So you don't get anything for nothing. So if you've got a lower credit rating, you'll be paying more for your interest as well too. So that's probably the other factor involved too here. So look, possibility. I don't know if it would be viable long term, because you'd end up having a small group in there who'd be guaranteeing each other, and so it gets a little bit circular as well too. You don't get the diversification like you do with an entity where we're lending to 74 councils. I think it is, out of our 77 members at the moment as well too. Okay. You would have, currently you are, I think, 3.9% of the guarantee structure. If, say, you had 5 high growth councils, you'd be 20% of guarantee structure. Okay, so your risk as a council, as a guarantor, would also be a lot larger as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That's excellent commentary on some of the risk that we might face, and good questions, Councillor Sarah. Before we go to motion and the vote, just just a couple of questions from me with regard to the sustainability and the green social lending and that aspect of your borrowing. Are you anticipating a good deal of interest from councils and CCOs into the future for that sort of discounted margin borrowing?
Yes and no. We're going to see a lot more on the climate action loans because more councils will put in place greenhouse gas emission plans. The trouble with green and social lending is, of course, you do need to have projects identified. You do have to be borrowing specifically against those projects. You have to be reporting on those projects. So there's a scale question here as well too. It's very difficult to go and enter into a $5 million project as part of a green or a social loan. So projects typically have been green buildings like Takina here in Wellington. It's been the Whangarei District Council offices and centre up there. So it's been the Hut swimming pool, the Nainai swimming pool and the Hut. So typically those projects are more likely $50 million projects up to $200 million projects. Very difficult to put a $5 million project into that program.
Acknowledged. And so with those two new products together, is there any enforced or self-imposed limits that you're putting on the percentage of those against the percentages of usual borrowing that you're doing or lending that you're doing?
No, none at all. We're trying to encourage as many councils as possible to adopt the climate action loans. So that's going to be one of our KPIs going forward.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I'm mindful of the time and the need for a break for councillors. Mayor Paula, can I ask whether you'd be willing to move the motion? Excellent. And I'm happy to second. Is there any debate?
We need the 2 minutes, and thank you to our GFA for the really useful presentation. And, you know, while I do support the approach that they're taking in respect to reducing carbon emissions and using funding as a lever to do that, which makes sense, my concern always sits with the big cost of infrastructure. Not all infrastructure that can be delivered would fit into that basket, of course, but it's less to do with the LGFA's ability to lend and more to do with our ability to line up with national priorities and local priorities. And if Hamilton can deliver on a lot of aspects of infrastructure that are useful to New Zealand Inc. as well as Hamilton Inc., we should do so. But of course, the biggest constraint, as we just had in our previous items, is our ability to fund really expensive large-scale capital infrastructure projects, and yet that is the underpinning of success for both our city and for New Zealand in general. So I'm still talking that talk up in Wellington. How do we get government to buy in to what needs to happen to us as a nation, and what part places like Hamilton could play in building a strong nation? And we're not alone. You know, Blair, there's Tauranga and other areas too. And that's not discounting the rural and provincial sectors of New Zealand whatsoever. But I'm talking about a specific gap in funding which sits around critical infrastructure. It's clearly outlined in the infrastructure's 30-year strategy document. Actually, it's a really easy read. But it's when you read it, you kind of start to get a bit numb about the size of the numbers that we're facing. Three Waters' debate has flushed out some of those numbers for public consideration, but sitting behind transport, water, energy, a whole bunch, resilience, there are huge, eye-staggeringly eye-watering.
Got there.
Anyway, you know what I mean. Really concerning amounts of billions and billions of dollars of investment required, and that's when we need LGAF and other partners to come to the table in alignment, in strong alignment. Thank you.
And you did use your time. Thank you.
Hang on, and I've fluffed up a few words, you know.
Indeed. Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I just find it really interesting, this debt to revenue equation. It seems a little bit arbitrary for us now, and I think this is going to become a bigger issue going forward. I think it was the CEO of Infrastructure New Zealand said that a lot of councils' challenges are actually, they're the ones that can solve it, but they're constrained. And whether it's about trying to have these gold-plated credit ratings, guarantored, self-guarantored, when ultimately it's the ratepayers or the taxpayers that are all funding the whole thing. I think this is going to be something we should explore, whether we lose from an AA to an A or however it works, and you lose 0.05% of an interest rate, but you can fund infrastructure that's going to last for 50 to 100 years. I think those are the conversations we need to have. And we already have a successful CCO model. In fact, we've got several, but the airport's a great example of regional collaboration in the CCO model. And we know that LGFA funds CCOs. So yeah, I'm keen to explore that. And I think there's a real opportunity lying in front of us. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tariki.
Some of the words that we heard this morning were around financial discipline, and I certainly support those words as they were shared this morning. And I think the application of financial discipline is actually outlined for us in part of what LGFA is directing us to do in terms of being better at how we may give effect on how we will embrace climate change, our response to our communities, our social response to our communities, in order for us to benefit from a lower lending opportunity. And so while I acknowledge that our council makes every effort that it can to give effect and to deliver on those two particular aspects of our core business, it's not lost on me, as we've listened to this report from Mark this morning, that we can get a lower lending rate, which I believe will impact us significantly, because the numbers, I often tend to flick straight over to the next page because of those numbers. And so I think wherever we have the opportunity to potentially bring some of those numbers down, I think we've got a pathway laid out in front of us around how we can do that. I believe we have the smarts around how we can do that. We have some very smart people that work for this organisation. And so how we pivot ourselves to reposition ourselves to become a benefactor of a lower lending opportunity, I think is right out in front of us. And I think that the application of financial discipline will be better applied by governors.
And Councillor Casey Cox.
Yeah, just tautoko what Moko was saying in regards to the opportunity to access those lower interest loans. I'm very excited about carrots and appreciate that. But I also want to acknowledge the commitment that you've expressed to diversity, Mark, and look forward to seeing some changes in that space as you continue those conversations. And I appreciate the response around commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I think they're probably wrapped up in social concerns to some level and environmental. I just think when documents, we use Te Reo Māori more and more in our documents and reflecting our values, and I guess in order for that to be more meaningful, I would expect to see some relationship discussed in a document as well as to how an organisation relates to our mana whenua or to what their commitment is to Te Tiriti, and it just makes it more, more real, more meaningful. So I was pleased to see the use of Te Reo Māori, but I just like to see that bigger picture reflected as well. So I just want to reiterate that. But yeah, really appreciate the conversation. I've learned a lot about LGNZ through all that reading, and LGFA, I mean, and LGNZ. So just appreciate the sharing of that information to us. Kia ora.
I don't see any further speakers. I'll go soon to the Mayor for a right of reply, but first, thank you, Mark, for taking the time to present your reports to us today. The LGFA provides an excellent opportunity for Council to be able to meet the needs of our community and to be able to do that funding in a much more a mindful way of keeping the costs, etc., down. I think we absolutely benefit as a shareholder and as a borrower, and there's no doubt about the way that we can express those benefits to our community. I'm excited about the opportunities for the CAL loans and the GSS, and look forward to how our staff can present borrowing opportunities that will be able to access both of those kinds of borrowing products. And that's it from me. Thank you. Mayor Paula, right a reply?
None required.
None needed.
Good, thank you.
We'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour, show of hands. And against? Carried unanimously. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for
Thank you
your
very much.
presentation. And item 10, resolution to exclude the public. I'll move, have a seconder, my deputy. All those in favour? Aye. That gives us a morning tea break and the opportunity to stretch your legs. We're back here at 5 to 12.